So we're just about a minute away. People are still coming in.
Mrs. Fortner, I did loan the rabbi a copy of your book.
Oh my goodness, how lovely. Thank you. And I believe you would mean yesteryear I lived in paradise.
Yeah, I didn't loan him a cookbook because he's a vegetarian.
That's Myrtle Betts' book. Hi, Glenda.
Hi.
All right, maybe I'll give it a few more minutes. People are coming in quite a bit. So I'll just give it another minute or two and then we'll get going with announcements at least.
Yeah.
And people will still be able to come in.
There's a good group here tonight.
Yes, there is. This is nice.
Yeah, it was a good sign up.
Very nice. While we are pre-program, just to put on this wonderful museum newsletter that was created by our office manager, Carol Courtwright, for this season. So it's hot off the press. It gives quite a bit of news on the museum. If you haven't seen it, or if you are not a member of the museum, but would like to see this publication, please call the museum or email or let me know and I'll see that you get it. There was, of course, a mention of this evening's Zoom room program, but also a message from our new president, Bob Fortner, and information about the exhibits. We have phase 1 up. Phase 2 is on its way and going in. And these are various features that are related to the history of Palm Harbor, some very interesting programs. And actually, in June, we will be connecting to one. We will be featuring a program on Lois Oxnam, and she has a feature in the museum, and you're going to get a chance to really learn more about her. There's just all kinds of tidbits about what Palm Harbor was like in those years when Lois Oxnam was young, and also when she became the manager of the Boot Ranch property. And Boot Ranch and its history are quite fascinating, and it all ties in to the museum. So there will be an opportunity to see that on our Meet Me at the Museum in June. Next month, we have a program related again to Lipa Ratner, but it's not from Lipa Ratner, it's from an artist in this region in North Pinellas, and she's going to talk to us about the art community, the visual art community of this region, and in particular, some work. I'll share more about that with you later. I don't want to go into it now, but before the end of tonight, I'll give you a preview of what's coming up next month with Meet Me at the Museum. But if you haven't seen the new newsletter, and it's a beautiful one, be sure and mention in the chat, or I'll put my email in the chat. And if you want to email me and request a copy of it, our members receive it, but if you're not a member, or you are a member and you didn't get it for some reason, please do let me know. We'd be happy to send it to you. And let me welcome all of you here. We have a wonderful group, 24 at this time, and I imagine more will come in potentially, because not everybody arrives right at the exact time, so that's all right. I want to turn the microphone, if you will, over to Bob Fortner, who is our president. And Bob, if you would like to share anything at this time, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Joy. And most importantly of all, I want to share our gratitude to you for this, and to Jean Barnes for all that she does for the museum. And as you said, Carol Courtwright. Also, I want to mention the Beacon. I hope some of you get to Beacon, because Sharon Lamb does an incredible article on the museum every month in the Beacon, and it's really quite impressive. So we are having extended hours now. We're open on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and we are going to have some great volunteer opportunities coming up, including if anyone out there likes to paint. We're going to be painting the Grove House, and we'll tell you more about that. And we really are looking for docents who would be willing to come to the museum for even a 2-hour shift. again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'd love to see some Sunday hours. And we have some other exciting things going on that I don't want to get into tonight because I don't really have the details to get into them. But things are moving ahead. We're looking to the post-COVID museum days, so to speak, and where we can see all of you face to face. But in the meantime, I think me at the museum is something that not only do we appreciate now, but we'll want to continue into the future. Joy willing and God willing. So that's all I have, Joy. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob. And I too am very, very excited about the, as we wind down, we hope, with COVID, and we come into a time where we can be at the museum and out in the world and so many things that we want to do again. What a pleasure. And I hope all of you have remained well. And we're just so happy to see you with us. And we have a wonderful program tonight, and I will turn to it. Joining us in our Palm Harbor Museum Zoom room for a program on Temple Ahavat Shalom of Palm Harbor are Rabbi Matt Berger and Ed Marks. And to read, just very quickly, read from the flyer that we put out in 1976. And this was a little bit before I arrived in this region, but not much, because I came in 1981. And I remember that Palm Harbor in this time did not have a lot going on up here. A lot of the land was still orange groves, and there was no really busy community that we see in Palm Harbor now. And Temple Ahavat Shalom was founded in that year, 1976, by 18 families. And literally, they must have been psychic, because it was just before the explosion of growth that Palm Harbor and North Pinellas saw. And so the Jewish community has grown greatly in this region. Temple Ahavat Shalom has become a very important center of Jewish life in North Pinellas and in all of Pinellas County. It is a Reform congregation, and you'll hear, I know, from the Rabbi and Ed about Reform Judaism, if you're not familiar with it. This is a community that serves individuals all the way south to St. Pete and north all the way to Port Richey, and all the way into Tampa through the Westchase and Waterchase and Eagles areas as well, and into Pasco County through Hudson and Trinity and more regions as well. So it's 45 years that Temple Ahavat Shalom is celebrating now, and I'm just so pleased to have the Rabbi and Ed with us. So first of all, what I'm going to do before they start, because I haven't done it yet, and I think it would be wise, if all of you would either mute yourselves. Yes, you can mute yourselves, or if you're not muted and I hear noise, I'll mute you. But it would be wise if you would kindly mute yourself, just so that we can give the floor to the Rabbi and Ed. And then later we will open things up for you to ask them questions and have a conversation. So I have no idea who's beginning. I know that Ed has photographs. I know the Rabbi is going to be speaking as well and presenting and singing for us. So I'm just going to say, Rabbi and Ed, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with us at the Palm Harbor Museum.
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's wonderful to see all of you on screen one, and I'll go over to screen two. Just really is a pleasure to see all of your faces and join you in the Zoom room. I guess I'll go first. That's what Ed and I talked about. And I'll share a message with you and some teachings with you. I'll turn it over to Ed. I think it'd be great to have questions and answers. And then maybe toward the end, I can play a couple songs on the on the guitar.
And let me mention too that many, I imagine, have not yet met you because you began last year during the period of the pandemic. So a hearty welcome to Pinellas County and to Palm Harbor.
Thank you. Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts, and I've been at a few congregations, most recently Houston, before here. I figured I'll start with a little bit about Reform Judaism, because that topic was brought up beautifully by Joy. So I grew up in the Reform movement, which is certainly among the more liberal end of Judaism. There's Orthodoxy, which takes a very literal approach to Jewish law and the rules that the rabbis subsequently made. There's conservative, which also takes very seriously all of the mitzvot or sacred obligations, some people would call them commandments, that the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and the rabbis enacted in the many hundreds of years following that. And then there is Reform, which really started way back in Germany in the very early 1800s. This was a time when really Orthodox Judaism was the only style of Judaism. And there were some folks who were interested in bringing in some reforms, like with a small r, maybe having a sermon in the vernacular German as opposed to Yiddish, where most sermons were delivered in Yiddish at that time, kind of the lingua franca of the Jews, which is a combination of Germanic dialect as well as Hebrew, using Hebrew characters. Also, having women and men pray together. So in the Orthodox world, there's usually some sort of a separator, either by floor or maybe a small partition that separates the men and the women. And the early reformers in Germany were interested in having men and women sit together. And then also the use of musical instruments. So interestingly enough, on Shabbat and on various Jewish holidays, there are 39 categories of work that you're not supposed to engage in, all of which can be traced back to the creation of the Ark and the tent of meeting in the book of Exodus, the second book of the Torah. One of those categories of work is using musical instruments. And the thought is, well, what if you break a string? Then you would have to fix it on Shabbat, and you're not allowed to do certain types of work. So still to this day, all singing on Shabbat, Friday evening to Saturday evening, and major Jewish holidays in the Orthodox world is done a cappella. And in the conservative movement, for the most part, still a cappella, unless you have a Shabbat evening, a Friday evening that starts very late, and perhaps before the service, someone would play piano or guitar before you lit the 2 Shabbat candles, one for remembering and one for observing Shabbat, the day of rest. Well, the reformers could only go so far in Germany. And when they eventually, in the 1800s, mid-1800s, moved over to the United States, there was much more freedom in so many ways. Most importantly, they didn't have 1,000+ years of Orthodox Jewish tradition and rabbis looking over their shoulders saying, this is the one and only way that you can practice Judaism. So once the reformers came to America, they decided to create a rabbinical seminary to train future rabbis, created a movement which now is called the Union for Reform Judaism, which began in 1875. And the first graduating class of the rabbis was in 1883 in the original seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio, which has a lot of Jews now, but believe it or not, in the mid to late 1800s had more Jews than Chicago. This is like pre-transcontinental railroad where river traffic Cincinnati was like a huge hotbed of Jewish activity. Now the Reform movement has seminary campuses in Los Angeles, New York, and Jerusalem, where all the first year students go. And Reform Judaism, the best way to describe, in my opinion, about the Reform Jewish approach to mitzvot or commandments are all of the ethical, value-based commandments, like honoring parents, not stealing, not gossiping, things of this nature. All of those, all Reform Jews need to do. And these are really values that, regardless of your religion, you would want to be involved in. However, all of the ritual commandments, like how many prayers do you have to pray, how many times a day do you pray, whether or not you keep dietary law, which is called kashrut in Judaism, separating milk and meat. If you're a vegetarian, it's really easy to keep kosher because you don't have to deal with, obviously, meat or milk. All of these, they have a vote, but not a veto, meaning Reform Jews should understand these, learn about these ritual commandments, but we're not necessarily, in our belief, bound by these commandments. So Judaism ritually has a vote, but not a veto. So it's okay, if you're a Reform Jew, to mix milk and meat. Many Reform Jews wouldn't, and some would. But it's really a personal choice through knowledge. And that's probably a succinct way of talking about Reform Judaism. And one more thing on that topic, on various social issues or issues of inclusivity, Reform Judaism tends to trend left or trend more liberal. That being said, statistically, about 25% or so of Reform Jews in the US, the last time they did a study, are conservative. And then the plurality are liberal in terms of political affiliation. But of course, in every congregation, there is a different mix. And here in Florida, much like Florida is to a certain extent balanced in this respect, I would certainly say that Temple Ahavat Shalom, there seems to be a balance as well. So that's a little bit about Reform Judaism. What I wanted to do today, before I move it over to Ed, is talk about the importance of community in Jewish life. And this is where I'm going to share the screen with you. So I like to teach by looking at a text and kind of exploring what different individuals had to say about a particular topic. So I'm going to share the screen. And this is a teaching from a rabbi named Hillel. Hillel lived the end of the 1st century before the Common Era. That's just the way that Jews do dating, before the Common Era, and until the 1st century of the Common Era. And he lived in Roman Judea in Jerusalem. And he has 2 really interesting teachings about community. So this is the first one that he said: do not separate yourself from, oh, look at that, it's there. Picture of Hillel, or at least, they didn't have photography back then. And Hillel said, don't separate yourself from the community. Do not trust yourself until the day of your death. Do not pass judgment upon your neighbor until you have come into his place. And do not say, when I have leisure, I will study. You may never have the leisure. So within this first teaching, you have 2 very important, in essence, teachings on community. So one, you really shouldn't live in isolation. You really need to be within the group, that there's strength within the group. And perhaps just as importantly, don't just judge other people, but try and put yourself in their shoes, which is the very definition of empathy and engendering a sense of respect, that every single person is created in the image of God. And there's a very, very nice teaching that Hillel has, kind of a three-part teaching, which talks about the importance of taking care of yourself, taking care of others within the community, and when you need to start doing that. Hillel said, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? Meaning you need to engage with the community. And if not now, when? You know, all of us are super busy with our own individual lives, our family lives, our work lives of leisure and free time. But we need to have relationships with the greater community and do our best to repair our community and bring peace within our community. And we need to start now. We can't just wait till a later date. If you scroll down, Judaism is a big religion, is a big proponent of the most important time is now in our lifetimes. To be sure, Judaism has various understandings of what happens in terms of life after death, in terms of a world to come that would be a messianic time. Those are all teachings that are within the pantheon of Jewish knowledge. But what's important is what we do now. And this teaching, which is in the Talmud, one of the great rabbinic commentaries after the Torah, says these are the things, the fruits of the person enjoys in this world, while the principal enduring in the afterlife. Things we need to do, honoring our father and mother within our family life, and then towards the community, performing acts of love and kindness. These are good deeds. To attend the house of study daily, to keep learning and keep inquisitiveness as a major tenet in your life, which involves minimally one other person or more from the community. To welcome the stranger that either comes to your house or comes to the various Jewish institutions, such as synagogues, Jewish community centers, and the like. To visit the sick, which many times happens outside of our home. To rejoice with bride and groom within the community. To accompany deceased to their rest, to pray with sincerity, to make peace between one person and the other, and the study of Torah. So this is the 5 books, Genesis through Deuteronomy, but also the greater Torah, which is Jewish tradition and Jewish knowledge. That is equal to them all, because when we learn what our religious tradition is saying. This is important. These are the messages that I'd like to share with this generation, and so on and so forth. There are many, many Jewish organizations, but without a doubt, there's a central role of the synagogue or temple. Now, in the main, conservative and Orthodox congregations call themselves synagogues, because once upon a time, there was a Jerusalem temple, number one, kind of central place of worship. And then after that was destroyed by the Babylonians, it was rebuilt and then destroyed again by the Romans. The Reform movement doesn't really have an issue per se with calling their congregations a temple. But there still are, at least in the prayers within conservative and Orthodox movements, prayers for the rebuilding of the third temple in messianic times, or times of greater peace. And here's a beautiful statement, this by the late Alexander Schindler, who was the president of the Union for Reform Judaism, who died in the year 2000. The synagogue is where Jews are made, where the individual soul and the community are joined. It is the place where modernity and eternity cross-fertilize, where the seeds of Jewish identity are sown. All other institutions in Jewish life are created by Jews, but only the synagogue creates Jews, child by child, family by family. And I think one of the really telling aspects of this teaching, this nugget of wisdom, which has a great deal of depth, is you can do many things as a Jewish individual in the privacy of your own home. You can pray by yourself. You can celebrate Jewish holidays by yourself. But Judaism says that's not enough. You always have to interact with the community. You need to come together for prayer. In fact, there's a minimum requirement of hopefully having 10 men and women in the Reform movement count towards what's called a minyan, or a prayer gathering. And all of the prayers in Judaism, really almost all of them, are in the first person plural, meaning we pray for peace. We are giving thanks for the gifts that we have that God gives us. There are specific times where there are individual prayers, but well over probably 97, 98% of the prayers in Judaism are communal in nature, which just speaks to the importance. There are various community values that Jews share. I put the Hebrew, this is just the transliteration. In English, Ahavat Re'ah, which is love your neighbor as yourself, which many of us are familiar with, the Levitical commandment. Hachnasat Orchim, the importance of hospitality, first shown in the book of Genesis with Abraham and Sarah. The importance of visiting the sick. There's a teaching that when you're at the bedside of someone who's ill, that God's presence is with you. So it's a small community right there. Pursuing justice. This is the command in Deuteronomy, Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof, justice and equity. Comforting the bereaved. Jews come together for the first 7 days of mourning following the funeral and burial, and that's called Shiva, where there's a gathering, usually a meal of consolation and some prayers. Good deeds or acts of loving kindness. These are called Gemilut Chasadim. The importance of communal prayer, Avodat HaKodesh, which means holy worship. And finally, a big push for study. And Jews, for minimally 3,000 years, there are, tablets of Jewish school children from well over 2,000 years ago, where Jewish children, maybe even adults, etched into stone the Aleph Bet. These are the first two letters of the Hebrew language, which shows just from a really, really early time in Jewish tradition, learning holds primacy. And it's always best to learn within a community setting, because then you get to learn from each other. And then you also get to teach. Learners can also become teachers as well. And finally, there are many Jewish organizations. In Tampa, this is where the majority of the Jewish population lives. So some of these organizations are going to be based in Tampa. But a synagogue really has three parts to it. In theory, that it's a place of gathering, it's a place of study, and it's a place of prayer. Some Jewish families have their children go to a Jewish day school, which is a parochial school where you would split half Judaic curriculum and half Florida state curriculum. Then, of course, there are supplementary religious schools, usually on Sunday or perhaps a day during the week for Hebrew school at various congregations and temples. The Jewish Federation is the umbrella organization of Jews. They do tremendous amounts of fundraising, community events such as the recent Yom HaShoah Holocaust Memorial commemoration that's open to the entire community. They'll bring in guests, Jewish musicians, scholars and residents, and the like. And they're a philanthropic organization, and also supporting Israel is part of any Jewish federation's mandate, as well as the local Jewish population. Jewish Family and Children's Services, which we have in Tampa, provides job search help, sometimes can help with obtaining free loans, therapy for kids and adults. It's a very important organization. JCCs, or Jewish Community Centers, which marry kind of working out as well as having cultural programming. There are various homes for the ages, or nursing homes such as Menor Manor in St. Pete, which is a nonprofit. Of course, there are Jews and non-Jews in all of these facilities. Many times when a Jewish community begins from scratch, the first thing that they create before anything else is a burial site, or create a Jewish cemetery. And if there isn't a funeral provider who can help families and prepare the body in a ritual sense, according to Jewish law, there'll be a burial society of lay people who will learn what to do and care for the deceased until they are buried. That's called the Hever Kadisha. Every Jewish community has a mikvah. Now here, a mikvah is usually it kind of looks like a hot tub, and there are 7 steps going down. It's a place for ritual immersion. Jews who are converting, they'll dip themselves 3 times, demarcating the time from before they were Jewish to God's presence enveloping them like the water, and then becoming Jewish. Here in Pinellas, we're close to the Gulf Coast, so a lot of people will just go to the ocean, which serves as a huge mikvah, the Gulf of Mexico, and those who perform circumcisions, very important for baby boys, on the 8th day of their verse. There are Torah scribes. The Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, is written. There are 2 wooden dowels, and then parchment, very, very long pieces of parchment, about 150 feet worth of parchment, where the Hebrew lettering is written by hand by a trained sofer or soferet. That's the Hebrew word for a male or a female scribe. They will also create the small little parchments for mezuzahs. So a mezuzah, you would find that on a Jewish home or Jewish buildings or a synagogue. It's usually a small case that's on the right side of the door on the lintel, facing in, and it has the words of the Shema, which is a central prayer in Judaism. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one, and talking about the various ways that we need to love God and teach Jewish wisdom to our children and our grandchildren, so that the essence of Judaism goes from one generation to the next. And then finally, Kosher Restaurants. There's one in St. Pete, and it's actually a great little Jewish grocery store that my family went to for Passover, where you can get hard-to-find kosher for Passover items. And then in some communities, there are actually Jewish bakeries, which have what's called a hechsher, which is a rabbinic stamp of approval saying that every food item in that bakery or in the kosher restaurant is indeed kosher, and that certain things aren't happening, like, milk and meat coming together. And then that's pretty much it. So you can close and I thank you for the save, Joy. But I've done a lot of talking. I'll turn it over to Ed for his historical perspective.
All right, and Ed, you are a co-host. I hope you will be able to share. If not, we will finagle a little more.
Well, I do as well. We'll get there. Just supplementing a little bit of what the rabbi said, the Rockdale Temple in Cincinnati, Ohio, is the oldest Jewish congregation west of the Alleghenies, and it was one of those congregations that was formed by Jews coming from Germany. It started as a sort of a semi-Orthodox congregation, but because so many of those had brought the German tradition with them, it became one of the centers of Reform Judaism. I'd also like to talk just a little bit generally about the growth of Reform Judaism in the world. As Rabbi Berger said, Orthodox and conservative congregations and thinking is very much centered around a very tight community, particularly, say, 200 years ago. And the community stuck together very, very closely. Well, as Jews came to the United States, they discovered that for the first time in history, they could simply fit into the community like everyone else. And that meant that they were able to move to places other than those cities that had large Jewish populations. My family came from Germany in 1850. In 1851, they came to Cincinnati and joined what is now known as Rockdale Temple. But they then moved down to Georgetown, Kentucky, a very small city, a very small town, where they opened a general store. Now, there were no other Jews in town, so it was impossible for them to find that minyan that Rabbi spoke about, that group of 10 adult Jews who would be necessary for prayer. So they had to develop new ways of expressing and feeling their Judaism. There was a small community in Ovando, Montana, of 4 Jews, and they had to drive almost 100 miles to find a congregation. So these are some of the ways that Reform Judaism grew. I want to take us back to the mid-1970s when Palm Harbor was a small community, largely citrus groves and swampland. Boot Ranch at that time, of course, was a ranch. East Lake Road, I understand, was 1-lane dirt. And it was, there was none of the development that has come further to the north. Indeed, we live in East Lake Woodlands, which wasn't created until about 1984. In 1977, some developers bought 4,400 acres of land, and that's what became East Lake Woodlands ultimately. The population in the area was fairly sparse, but starting to grow as a bedroom community for Tampa and Clearwater. When I first came to this area in the 70s, it took about 90 minutes to get from Tarpon Springs, where we visited friends, to the Tampa International Airport. I'm not even sure it was an international airport at the time. And it was over 2-lane roads through orange groves, heavy with traffic because, as I said, the population was starting to grow. There was a Jewish population, a community in Clearwater, and several wonderful synagogues there, congregations. But imagine, if you will, driving on a Friday night in rush hour traffic about 17 or 18 miles from Palm Harbor down to South Clearwater on 2-lane roads at rush hour on Friday to attend services there. It wasn't easy. And on Sunday, when the Jewish children from Palm Harbor went down to Clearwater, it was a 2-hour period each week when they were together with other Jewish children who they didn't really know. And learning became difficult. As we all know, children don't incorporate new people very easily. Pardon me, let me shut this down. In 1976, a group of 18 Jewish families who lived in and around Palm Harbor decided to band together and create a new community, a congregation, a holy congregation where they could pray closer to home and teach their children the heritage and religion that their families had followed for many years. They originally named the congregation, think how this rolls off the tongue, the Reformed Jewish Congregation of Northern Pinellas County. not a particularly sexy name for a congregation. Soon they changed that to in essence, the Temple of the Love of Peace, or Ahavat Shalom. Originally, they met in a hotel, in a conference room at a motel, really, with a portable ark that carried the Torah scroll, which contains, as Rabbi Berger said, the first 5 books of the Bible in Hebrew with no vowels. That Torah is read in portions each week, and it's completed once each year. And at the end of that year, when the Torah, when the congregation gets to the end of the Torah, the scrolls are rewound back to the beginning, and that holiday is called Simchat Torah. In some congregations, it's a very, very, very festive occasion, complete with various forms of imported and domestic wines, whiskeys, and such. After a year or so at the hotel, they rented a Chinese restaurant or an Indian restaurant. There's a disagreement among those who were there on which kind of aroma hung around. That's not unusual for us Jews, by the way. They say anytime you get 2 Jews together, you'll have at least 3 opinions on any topic. But back to the congregation. At first, members of the group led services except for the high holy days. And other times when they could hire either an available rabbi, either from academia, from a secular position, or from retirement. After a number of years, they retained the services of Rabbi Jan Bresky, who was the congregation's first rabbi. He now has passed away. But after a few years with Ahavat Shalom, he decided to devote full time to a broadcast television ministry that he had started. The congregation had grown from the original 18 families and decided it needed its own home. There were perhaps 50 to 60 families at the time. And in the mid-1970s, they purchased an old orange grove on Curlew Road. Originally, the building was the social hall. This was the entire Temple Ahavat Shalom. A few years later, they realized that the time had come to expand that. But before we get there, the multi-purpose building went up around 1980. A few years later, the congregation hired Rabbi Gary Klein. I actually knew him up in Cincinnati when he was at the Hebrew Union College there, and he was even younger than this picture. Rabbi Klein came here from Altoona, Pennsylvania, and served as our senior rabbi for over 33 years until he retired last July 1st, which is when Rabbi Matt joined us. Rabbi Klein is our Rabbi Emeritus. Not long after Rabbi Klein arrived, the congregation had outgrown that original facility, and they broke ground for an addition which became the sanctuary and the religious school. Our sanctuary now covers a good deal of the orange grove. We have about 450 families, mostly from northern Pinellas County, from Pasco and Western Hillsborough, although we draw from much farther than that as well. With much of, as is the case with much of Florida, our average age is probably a bit higher than the rest of the country, but we also have a vibrant religious school, starting with the little guys and going all the way through high school, in addition to adult education. We're very proud of our senior study. This is not the senior study class. Young adults return to the school after confirmation, which takes place at around age 15, And they discuss not only a religion, but also societal issues that they're going to face as adults. Our campus is decorated with art of all sorts. Much of it has been decorated, either created or decorated by members. The sanctuary itself, and this photo was taken during the pandemic. It's large, but it's warm, it's comfortable. And we've tried to remain open as much as possible while still considering the health and safety of people. So we do have distancing regulations. We live stream our services to those who don't attend in person. And also, of course, we live stream committee meetings, religious school online, and adult education classes. Temple Ahavat Shalom is a welcoming place. If you'd like to visit for service some Friday evening, give a ring to our office and let them know. We have recently relaxed the numbers that we've been permitting in the building in line with CDC recommendations and recommendations from a committee that we formed consisting of doctors, public health people, pharmacists, and so on. But we do ask everybody to call and make reservations so we don't go over it. By the way, for our 40th anniversary several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, we put together a video which is available on our website, ahavatshalom.org. And I think finally, I just want to say we really are very happy to be part of the Palm Harbor community. My wife and I moved down here full-time about 6 years ago, and we just love it. We're very, very comfortable. One of the reasons is that everybody has been so welcoming.
Wonderful, Ed. Thank you so much. And Rabbi, both of you gave us beautiful presentations. And I know, Rabbi, you have more planned because you are going to, we asked the Rabbi if he would be kind enough to sing for us because the congregation has had Rabbi Klein for so many years, but he was not a guitar playing a rabbi and singing rabbi. But so this is a first for the congregation as well. But I want you to do this in the order you had planned. Would you like to open it up to comments first? Would you like to take over again, really, as you would like to do?
I'd say let's open it up for questions, and then I'm not sure when the end point is. If it's 7:45, we should leave maybe 5-6 minutes at the end.
I just want to express my appreciation to the members of the Jewish community in Palm Harbor, because I learned tonight that being a part of community is, in fact, essential to Jewish life. And that explains a lot to me, because I've always found Jewish people to be very engaged and helpful in our community. And I thank all of you who are members of that community. So I've appreciated learning about this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry.
His hand up.
Yes.
You're muted, Anita. And that doesn't happen very often.
Oh, right. I just wanted, it's part of the history. My parents moved here in '68. We're in Fairway Estates, so we're sort of like on the other side of Curlew. Curlew at that time was practically just one lane each way, a dirt road. Actually, it took less time to get to the airport because there were no traffic lights. Not much traffic either. We were all very, very upset when the shrubbery started getting cut down, and everybody wondered what was going up at that corner. And then when it turned out to be a church on the corner, the temple in the middle, the church on the other side, we said, well, we've got Religion Row here, and we're good, and we're squished in the middle between two churches. We're going to be okay. And so my mother was a member. And so I'm like a second generation. Anyhow, that was at the beginning. Seeing the property, it was a beautiful grove. And then there were the for 3 buildings.
Wonderful.
So that's it. Back to you.
Marty, just unmute yourself.
Yeah, just a quick question, Rabbi. You mentioned a restaurant in St. Pete that you and your family had gone to. What was the name of the restaurant?
I think it's called Joel's, like J-O and then E-L. It's like a portmanteau of 2 names together. And they do have a delicatessen. I think they were closed during Passover. A lot of times during Passover, it's easier for a kosher restaurant to just close, frankly, than to flip the kitchen over. Many Jewish day schools, during the 7 or 8 days of Passover, they'll just go on vacation because it's challenging to do the work of flipping the kitchen to making it kosher for Passover. But they also have a grocery section as well.
Rabbi,
It's not that big, but it's got a lot of stuff.
And I just put that in the chat as well.
We might want to mention that for those Orthodox, those who keep kosher, they separate milk dishes from meat dishes to the degree that they have a separate set of dishes for milk and meat. And not only that, but sometimes they have 2 dishwashers. And for Passover, everything has to be cleaned, and there's a separate set of Passover milk dishes and Passover meat dishes. So for a restaurant, it really is a tremendous chore. They have to keep and store 2 additional complete sets of dishes, as well as utensils and so on. And that's one of the reasons that many kosher restaurants close during Passover.
Great question. Brenda?
My dad is buried in a cemetery in Clearwater, and near his gravesite is a rabbi buried. And whenever I go to visit my dad's gravesite, I always like to walk down and look at the rabbi's gravesite. And on there are always little stones on the headstone. I was wondering what the significance of placing stones on a headstone of a deceased.
So that's a great question. And it is a custom to do that for a number of reasons. And there are various explanations for it. First, to show others that someone else has visited the gravestone. There's also a thought that the deceased, the loved ones that are being visited, they can kind of see from above, so to speak, that a loved one or a friend or a family member has come and visited. And there you just pick up any stone and you place it atop. Either if it's a stone, you'd put it on top of the stone, or if it's really a footstone, like a plaque, made out of bronze, you would just place it on there. It's just a sign of respect and love.
Ah, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We did have a beautiful remark in the chat from Sue Rishworth regarding the Baha'i faith. Rabbi, if you would like to respond to that she appreciated both presentations and has noticed how similar the beliefs are to the Baha'i faith.
Yeah, actually, what's interesting, the International Center for the Baha'i Faith is actually in Haifa. It's an absolutely gorgeous piece of property that really goes up and down Mount Carmel, which is the main geographical figure of Haifa in the north of Israel. But I would agree. I mean, just a sense of loving your neighbor, of doing good deeds, of respecting others. I mean, these are familiar values for Judaism, for Baha'i, and of course, many other religions, Christianity, Islam as well. If I understand it correctly, though, from people who are Baha'i, usually there isn't necessarily like a religious leader, per se. So it runs a little bit differently. But every Baha'i congregation that I visited is usually an absolutely gorgeous building from an architectural standpoint, bringing in many kind of Middle Eastern motifs, and the people are invariably very, very pleasant and respectful. Hi, Glenda.
My name says M. Gunnels, but I'm Glenda.
I figured it wasn't Megan.
I'm from the Palm Harbor area, but I've been down here in Largo since 61. So where is the temple in Palm Harbor?
So it's CR1 and Curlew is the closest intersection, but it's west of 19 and a little bit west of Belleair, maybe by a half mile, give or take.
It's just about a quarter mile west of the museum. Do you know where St. Alfred's is?
I'm sorry?
You know where St. Alfred's is?
No,
The Episcopal Church?
no, I don't.
If you go from the museum west on Curlew,
Yeah.
you'll see the cemetery and then St. Alfred's, and we're
I
right.
know. Okay. All right. I know where it is now. Yes.
Nice.
Okay. I've seen it there, but I was
Set-
trying to, couldn't
it's set-
remember.
Yeah, it's set back from the road.
Okay. I know where it is now. Yeah.
Awesome.
And by the way, in other religions, not just religions, other people too, will put coins on the tombstone when they visited. It's
Oh, wow.
something, I've heard of that before too.
Interesting.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Really
My pleasure.
enjoyed it tonight.
Any other questions?
It's music time.
Yeah.
All right. So from a time standpoint, you want one or two?
Oh, we'll always take more. Two would be great.
All right. So
If you're offering, we'll accept.
So the first one would be a traditional prayer called Yedid Nefesh, which is a heart's delight, source of mercy. I run like a deer into your arms. It's almost like a love story. Part of the Friday night receiving Shabbat liturgy. This one, Yedid Nefesh, Heart's Delight, it was arranged by Craig Taubman, who's a Jewish singer and songwriter. Yedid Nefesh, Avarachaman, Avarachaman, Mishok Avicha, El Ritzonecha, El Ritzonecha, Yarutz Avdecha, Yemoaya, Ishakaben, El Muladarecha, Yedid Nefesh, Avarachaman, Avarachaman, Mishok Avdecha, El Ritzonecha, El Ritzonecha. So that's Yedid Nefesh there. Pleasure doing business with you, as I like to say. So this other one, this will go, so there's a Jewish prayer which is based on a passage in Exodus where the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, and then Miriam and the other women, they have these, like, you know, those hand timbrels, you know, and they're singing a song to God. And that's called Mi Chamocha, who is like you, God. It's in one of the two sections of the Torah, which are kind of look in a poem. They look at, they're kind of a bricks and mortar format to remind you of the Israelites creating the bricks and mortar for the pyramids in Egypt. But I'm going to do a very different version of this. Tomorrow, Friday night, I like a lot of pop music and folk music and stuff like that. So for the third time, we're doing a band Shabbat. We did one that was a Beatles Shabbat. I put the Hebrew prayers to Beatles melodies. I did a Simon and Garfunkel. Friday is Beach Boys. Love the Beach Boys. So this is a Mi Chamocha, who is like you, God, to help me, Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda. And for the congregants who are here, thank you for being here. You'll hear this again, replete with harmony. in a full band on Friday. This is to help me, Rhonda. Well, the Israelites were running, scared out of Egypt's land. They didn't even have the time to break the bread as planned. With the soldiers coming up from behind, they knew they didn't have much time to get to the other side of the Red Sea as they planned. Boom, 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 boom. Me come on, come, me come on, come. Me come on, come, me come on, come. Me come on, come, me come on, come. Me come on, come, boom, 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 boom. Me come on, come, me come on, come. Me come on, come, me come on, come. Me come on, come. By Lima Donai. All right. So basically what I did was I just, I learned the tune and then just made some words to go along with that. And then the Hebrew, the Mi Chamocha by Lima, that's actually part of the prayer itself. So I like doing that kind of stuff. To me, it's fun. It keeps things fresh.
Wonderful,
Kind of
Rabbi. That
uses
was
some
terrific.
creativity.
Thank you for singing for us. We really appreciated it.
My pleasure.
And the whole program, Rabbi and Ed both. I saw a couple of people come and go that I let back in the room. If there are any last questions, please take this moment, or last comments, please take this moment to just unmute yourself and ask or speak if you have anything else you'd like to add.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much that you could help us, Rabbi, to understand about your history and teachings.
It's my pleasure. It's a real honor to be here, and Ed was a great partner in this. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.
I so appreciate it so much too, as well. And I know you put a lot of time into putting it together and have been very generous with your time and just really filling us all in tonight, especially for the, and it's wonderful to know about, for those who are not Jewish, another faith, and really come to know them better and take them up on that. Visit the congregation. It's a beautiful temple. And if you haven't been there, do go. And
Absolutely. Always
We'd
welcome.
love to have you.
I know they would. Please take them up on that. Visit the website. And for all of you who've been with us, I'm so grateful to you for joining us. I have placed the Palm Harbor Museum where it's easy to find, palmharbormuseum.com. You can't get easier than that. But I do want to mention that we exist thanks to your memberships and your donations. If you're not a member, or if you'd like to leave a donation for the museum at any time, we're grateful to you. Additionally, other donations of historic items and so forth are appreciated as well. There are many ways, volunteers, many ways you can be a part of the Palm Harbor Museum. Please do visit the website. For all of you who are members, we're so glad you're here with us and glad for your membership, grateful to you. For all of you who have donated to us, we're deeply grateful to you for that. And I should say, if any of you would like to just open your, unmute yourself and any last chat or anything else you'd like to add, you're welcome to do that for the last 5 minutes or so.
Joy, would you remind us about what the May meeting is going to be?
It's always the third Wednesday evening of the month, May 19th, always at 6:30 p.m. The program is actually called Pioneer Women Artists in Tampa Bay, and it is a story of community. Our speaker is Linda Berghoff, and you're going to see as well, I videotaped her at the Lipa Ratner Museum with a couple of pieces, a couple of very extraordinary works that she spoke about. So you're going to see her speaking about that, but she's also going to be on the program to talk to you and answer your questions. In particular, the two works that she's going to describe are owned by the Lipa Ratner, and they are by the renowned artist and printmaker Miriam Shapiro. Was one of the very important women in the early feminist art movement. And Linda and her mother, Lois Berghoff, and Dorothy Cowden were pioneers of women artists in Tampa Bay. They set up a print workshop in Tampa and had a gallery. And Linda's going to talk about her mother and this print workshop. And she's going to talk about those works and show them. You'll see them closely. They were in the collection, so they were actually pulled out for you to see. And I videotaped Linda with the works, and she's going to explain this renowned printmaking process for which Miriam Shapiro was known. And also the work of these women artists, what they did in an era in our county, in Pinellas County, when it was all new. There was nothing like that here, and it's quite an interesting presentation. So that is coming up on May 19th. The June program will be a program focusing on Lois Oxnam, the ranch manager at Boot Ranch. It was a tiny little thing and powerful, just wow. What an individual, what a woman, and what an amazing human being. And Jan France is going to be with us too, who was her best friend, and is going to talk about life in Pinellas County and Boot Ranch in those years when a lot of what is here now wasn't here. And Kim and Mitchell is going to present an enactment of Lois Oxnam through her words. So it's like a double bill in June. That will be the third Wednesday in June, which will be the 16th of June. And you're always welcome to sign up for these programs. And of course, we invite you to be a member of the museum, but whether or not you are, you're welcome to come to our Meet Me at the Museum programs. We'll continue virtually for the moment, and whenever they go on site, we'll let you know of that as well.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you. You've all been great. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you all for joining us. Most everyone stayed with us all this time. Rabbi,
Have a wonderful evening,
thank you
everyone.
so much for your generosity and for your hospitality. And I'm very much looking forward to returning to the temple as well, now that the pandemic is, we hope, winding down. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, Chair. Goodbye, everyone.
Have a
Bye.
beautiful
Thank
month.
you.
We'll see you in May.
I
Or
think I'll see
hopefully before at the museum. Extended hours. Please do check out the website.
Thanks, Joy.
You're
Good
welcome.
night, Joy.
Good night. Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.